Okay, and then just the usual emoji or thumbs up or something so I know you can all hear me. Okay, great. Okay. All right, it is, let's see, it is 7 o'clock. It's Wednesday, November 18th. Tonight is the night we've been talking about and anxiously awaiting. The amazing Deya Hill is going to talk to us about Reggio. I know you guys have a ton of questions, a ton of really great questions after all of the activities and readings and videos. And she's, like I said, she's going to give about a 40-minute presentation and then 20 minutes for questions. I vetted a lot of those questions. I tried to send some to her, but she was having technical issues. But don't worry, because she's an expert, so you're not going to throw anything at her that she can't handle. So I'm going to give her a little formal introduction in a second, but just while I have all of you here before I lose you tonight, because we will go right up until 8 o'clock. We won't have time to go over the module, so I'm going to record a video tonight after we log off and look for it in the announcements. And then you will see there, I'll just walk you through the rest of the module, and really it's just finishing up the final projects, recapping everything together, and then setting aside time for us to meet and chat about anything outstanding. Okay, so we're really in the final stretch here, and in the next 2 weeks you'll finish the Working in the Reggio Way book as well as your journal. Okay, so without further ado, the person that we've all been so excited to see tonight, I'd like to introduce one of my favorite early childhood professors. She's worked in the ECE department 31 years. She's an expert on all things Reggio, and she's a mentor to me and just one of my favorite people. So please welcome Deya Hill. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Okay, and what I will do is I'm going to mute myself, let Deya take it over, and then like the last time we had guest speaker with Carrie Brooks, you can throw anything in the chat. She's not going to be reading the chat. I will, and the last 20 minutes will be open to questions.
Okay,
so take it away.
Can everybody hear me? Your thumbs up. Okay. Thank you for inviting me to class. I know quite a few of you, so it's great to be back, and it's great to be in your class, Stacey. So thank you so much. I'll get right to it. I did not receive the questions because my computer, the email part of my computer is down for some reason. So I'm sorry about that, but hopefully I'll cover the questions you have during what I talk about or at the end of my discussion. And I'm going to be checking my notes just so that I don't miss anything, because I really don't want to miss anything. So it happened for me about 35 years ago, which I know is probably older than many of you are. But I was at a convention in Washington, D.C., and I started to hear a lot of buzz around this topic called Reggio Emilia. And I started to read information about it, and they were actually doing some presentations about this. And it really perked my interest because Reggio Emilia is a town in northern Italy, as you all know now. But it really perked my interest because it's where my family is from. And so I started to read this information and I thought, can that be the same little town that my family comes from in Italy? And sure enough, it was. And so I went to everything that I could find at that convention that had to do with Reggio. And then I started to read and read and read. And I was so fortunate because my cousin and some of my relatives still live there. And so this was before it became popular. This is before everybody went there to study. And I went there and stayed with my relatives. And I studied there for months at a time before everybody else started to do that. I was very lucky. It was hard because I don't speak the language, shame on me. And so I had to have my cousin as an interpreter, and I had to drag her along with me every place I went, poor thing. But she was a good sport, so it worked out. But anyway, some of the general information I wanted to tell you about, which I think a lot of people may or may not know, is that the town of Reggio Emilia is not very big. It's only maybe the size of Lafayette, maybe a little bit more than Lafayette, but it's not very big. And there were 32 at the time. There were 32 of the preschools there. Now there are more than 32. There are about 36 of them. And when I went there, and this is still the case.
You like pizza cat?
Whoops. I found out that that the teachers there are all called educators. Whether you have your doctoral degree or whether you have your 2-year degree, it doesn't matter. You're an educator. There's no status. It's not you're a teacher, you're an assistant teacher. It doesn't matter. You're an educator, and you are paid the same salary as an elementary or a high school teacher is paid, according to your education, of course. So it's a pretty nice salary. It's not like it is here where we have to scrimp and save if you're a preschool teacher. So it's comparable to what we would pay our elementary school teachers here. One of the things that, well, I'm going to tell you a lot of things that stood out to me when I first went there, but you're paid by the city, so it's a municipal system. It's not a federal system, it's the city system. But at that time, most of these schools were just in the city of Reggio, and now, of course, it's all over the country of Italy. The question that was posed throughout the whole world at that time, and that sounds really extreme, but it was really true. The question that was posed was, where in the world are children the most motivated, the most stimulated, the most excited, the most uninhibited, the most curious to learn? And they did all kinds of studies, they did all kinds of research, and this was all over the world. And they collected data, and they didn't want to know at the moment. They wanted to know, where did it continue, not just while they were in school, but through elementary school, through high school, and even beyond. And this was not based on just test scores. It was based on happiness, about satisfaction, about self-esteem, self-motivation, and test scores as well. And what they found out was that the children in this little community called Reggio Emilia seemed to be the most successful and the happiest and the most satisfied children in the world. And that's what brought all the researchers and all the theorists to Reggio to begin their studies. That's how this all started. And I was just very lucky to get in at that time before it became so popular. So some of the things that stood out to me from the very beginning, first of all, each facility backs up to a park. And so the children, instead of having like a playground, have a park to play in. And so they play on natural things. They climb real trees, they climb on real rocks and, you know, fall on real rocks. They build mud pies. They make tunnels out of grass and twigs and things like that. There is not allowed, and there's streams running through it and those kinds of things. So everything is natural. In fact, they don't allow anything to be plastic. Plastic is not allowed. So you wouldn't see a plastic climbing structure, for example. It's all according to nature. So that was quite a change from what we're used to seeing here. Each school has what they call a piazza, which is a gathering place, and it's mostly where the parents gather, actually. I mean, anybody can gather there, but in the morning, what I found, it was really pretty cool, is it's kind of like a courtyard, and it's called a piazza, and the parents would be dropping their children off, and they would kind of hang around, and it was purposely made that way so that parents would stay and talk with each other and get to know each other. And the chef, which I'll tell you about in a moment, would make coffee, and Italian coffee is really good. And so they would make this coffee that would kind of draw you in, and it smelled really good, so you'd sort of want to hang around. And so And by the way, it opens at 7 and it closes at 7. So it's not like it's a program that's only a half a day program or whatever. Now you can stay for half a day, but most kids are there for the full day. The town of Reggio Emilia is kind of upscale, well-to-do community. So most of the parents are both working. And so most of them need their children in daycare for the majority of the day, or at least most of the day. So the piazza is there, and in the morning, coffee, I'm sorry, I don't know what's going on. Coffee and croissants are served. And then in the evening, when parents pick up their children, and that's usually the most popular time for parents to pick up was around 5. They would have lemonade or iced tea or something like that. And again, the parents would sort of hang around and talk to each other. Another thing that struck me was each school has an atelier. Now, an atelier, as you know by now, is the art studio. And every classroom has an art area, just like we do in our classrooms here. But in addition to the art area, they have an atelier, which is an art studio. And this is a great big room where you can't imagine the art supplies that are in there. And they're very well organized, and they're categorized. And you can see the art materials. All of the art materials are in transparent, translucent boxes, so that if a child feels like they need a certain kind of, they would be able to see it through the box. It wouldn't be hidden in a drawer. And so they would just go get it. And so the atelier is pretty amazing. And each atelier has a professional art teacher in it. So you have the classroom teacher. Actually, there's 2 to every classroom. And then you have the art teacher in the atelier as well. Each school has a professional chef as well. And there's a separate dining room in each school. So this is Italy, and typical of Italy, food is really important. And so the dining area was like a learning area. It was like a learning classroom. And the professional chef was trained in early childhood education, but also in culinary skills. The same with the art teacher. He was, most of the schools, it was a man, but male or female, they were trained with art and with early childhood education. And so in the dining experience, it just blew me away. It absolutely blew me away because, and let me see if I'm gonna tell you about that later. But the chef acts as a teacher. She or he doesn't just prepare the food for the kids and that's it. They are considered an educator in this system. Okay, and I'll tell you more about that in just a minute. I think the thing that impressed me the most when I first went there was how happy the children were. They were so happy. They were so free. They were so unencumbered. I never saw a child stressed. I never saw a child bored. I never saw a child bored. I never saw a teacher bored. And, you know, I thought about that, and I realized that the teachers were just as engaged with the kids as the kids were. So the teachers were on the floor painting with the children. They were in the sand with the children. They were climbing trees with the kids. They were totally with the children. They were not standing there with their arms folded, observing the children. So there wasn't room for boredom at all. Of course, you have to realize too, they have fewer restrictions there. They're not as insurance conscious there, shall we say, as we are here. And we can talk about that in just a second, but the kids are a lot freer to do what they need to do. Every classroom has 30 children, even when they're from 3 on. Even the babies have a lower ratio, but there are 2 teachers to every classroom. So their ratios are higher than ours, not lower. And a lot of people think they're going to be lower, that they have more teachers in each classroom, but they actually have fewer. But they don't hover over the children. They are not helicopter watching the kids like we do a lot of the times. In fact, it was interesting when I first got there. There was they had the classroom, and then they had a patio outside the classroom before you got to the park. And there was a kid out on the patio, and he was painting on an easel out there, but there was no teacher out there. And it was just one child. And I said to the teacher, because I'm so used to being here, and I had my own preschool for 15 years. And I said, just out of habit, I said, oh, there's a child outside on the patio. And the teacher kind of looked at me and she said, yes, like, so? And I said, oh, don't you have to have a teacher out there? And she said, she didn't mean to be rude. They're very polite, but she said, well, why? I can see him. He's right there. And then I felt really dumb. And I said, well, of course, but they have fewer regulations than we have. And it's true. I mean, she could see the kid right there and he wasn't going anywhere. So my point is that they're much freer. They're happier. I did not ever, and I know nobody believes me when I say this, but I will say this again. I did not ever see any disciplinary problems. I never saw a kid get in trouble. I never saw a kid punch another kid. And I thought a lot about that. I thought, you get in trouble whether you're 4 or whether you're 40 when you're bored. That's when you get in trouble. If you're engaged, if you're really focused on what you're doing, you don't get in trouble. And they just did not get in trouble. Of course, I also didn't hear, don't do this, don't do that, use your soft voice, I didn't hear any of that either. They were very, very different. The teachers are happy, the kids are happy. Okay, so, I'm going to tell you about snacks. So the children, because there's a professional chef, the children eat snacks. This is not their meal, this is snacks. When they're hungry, there's not a snack time. And I asked about that. And the teacher said, we do this purposely because we want the children to learn to self-regulate. We don't want to say, because it's 10 o'clock, you should be hungry. And I thought that was really interesting. I thought, do we set children up for eating disorders here? Do we say, because it's 10 o'clock, you should be hungry, whether you are or not? And I said, but do they eat? Because I know as a little kid, I didn't care about eating, and I probably would have skipped a million snacks. And she said, so what if they don't eat? And I thought, yeah, really, so what if they don't? But if they are hungry, or if they start to get a little low energy, they go into the dining room where there is a professional chef / teacher. And their snacks are always very nutritious. You would never see, cheese, what do you call those things? Goldfish, or apple juice or anything like that. It's water, it's good cheese, good bread, vegetables, things like that. It's not ever just junk. But snacks are not pushed. They only get their snacks if they want them. The walls in the schools are made out of plexiglass so that children can see into the other classrooms. So sometimes little kids would be looking in another classroom and they'd see their brother or sister and they'd wave and they'd get so excited, and their brothers and sisters would see them and they'd wave back. And then they would say to the teacher, can I go see my sister? And the teacher would say, well, of course you can. And so there was this exchange. There was not all of these rules and regulations about, oh, no, you're 3.6 years old. You can't go into there's just not any of that. It's, of course you can. And it didn't seem to be a problem. It just flowed. um, let's see. Let me see. I don't want to miss anything. So now I want to tell you about the meals, because the meals, I've told Stacey about this. The meals just blew me away. First of all, there's a dining room. And so the children are part of the dining experience. So certain kids are asked each day if they would like to help in the kitchen. And they don't have to, but if they would like to, they can. And they they do everything. And so the tables are set with real tablecloths. And sometimes the tablecloths are cloths that the children have made with, with paint. What do you call that kind of paint? Fabric paint. Or sometimes it's, regular tablecloths. And I said to the teacher, I said, "Wow, you use real tablecloths." And she said to me, again, they're very polite. She said to me, "Well, yes, we use tablecloths. What do you use?" Well, I said, well, sometimes we use placemats at school. Sometimes we don't use anything. And I know she was appalled when she heard that, but she didn't say anything. She was very polite. And she said, "Well, think about it." She said, a placemat says, "This is Deyah's place, and this is Stacey's place, and this is Yali's place." It separates you. But a tablecloth pulls you together. And I hadn't thought about it that way. I'd never thought about that. And I thought, when do you pull out your tablecloths? You usually pull them out on a holiday when you want your family to be together. And it made sense to me. And then the children set the table, and they use real pottery there. They don't use plastic. They don't use paper. And again, I asked, it's just plain. I mean, it's not fancy or expensive. It's just plain. And I asked about that, and she said, "Yes, we don't use artificial materials here." And I said, and she said, "Well, what do you use?" And I was like, "Oh my God!" So I said, "Well, sometimes we use plastic." And she said, "Oh," and she was polite, and she said, "Okay." And I said, "Some schools use paper." And I know she was really shocked to hear that, because it's so wasteful. So then I looked at the tables, and they have beautiful cloths on them. They have this beautiful pottery on them. And then this is what shocked me. All the tables have candles on them, and the candles are lit. And we're talking about little kids in preschool. And I said to her, "Do you light the candles?" And they didn't have them all in, what do you call this? Votive containers. Some of them were just like on candle holders. And she said, "Well, kids are not stupid. They're not going to stick their hand in a fire." And that's the difference. That's the difference. We don't trust our children as much as they do. And she said, "We tell them from very young, don't touch the fire. It will hurt you." And they don't touch the fire. And she said, "We've never had a child do that." So, that was a surprise to me. Also, the children make their own placemats for every table. Not placemats. I don't mean placemats. I mean what do you call those? These, centerpieces. Oops, I'm sorry. They make their own centerpieces. So it was really cute, because when I happened to be there the first time, flowers were not in bloom at that time of the year. And so I looked on the tables, and they had rocks and leaves and dirt and things like that on the table, but they had it arranged on a plate, and it was really pretty. And she said they decide completely by themselves. They do it themselves, and they do it every time. And sometimes it's pretty, and sometimes it's not so pretty, but it's their, it's what they do. She said, "We don't interfere with that." They play classical music for the meals, and the meal's a big deal. I mean, it's a gathering time. It's a coming together time. They call it their community time, because it's like a family, and it's slowed down. Oh, it's real slow. And I thought about if your schools provide lunchtime, and I thought about it here, and I thought a lot of schools, it's hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. And that's really not good for children. And some schools don't even allow children to talk with each other. And that's really unnatural during a meal. And I think some of you who come from different cultures, um, understand this better than we do in the United States, because I think some other cultures take time at meals and talk with each other. And sometime in the United States, we just hurry, 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 hurry all the time. It's really too bad. But they play soft music and everybody talks with each other, and it's a whole process. At the end of the meal, the children clean up, and I asked her about the pottery. I said, it's real pottery. Do you ever have accidents? And she said, once in a while we do, but not very often. Now the 2-year-olds don't. The teachers clean up the babies up to age 2, but from about 2.5, they clean themselves. They clean up their own stuff. What else? I think that's it. Circle time is an option. So what happens is the teachers will go around at about the time that you would normally have circle and say to the children, this is the time we normally have circle time. So what do you think? Do you want to have circle today, or are you too busy? Are you busy working on your projects, or what do you think? And the children decide if they want to have circle. And when I was there, most of the time the kids wanted to have it. But there were a couple of days, and they don't call it circle time, they call it gathering. But there were a couple of days when they didn't. They said, no, we're too busy. We have too much to do. And so they didn't want to have circle those days. And the teacher said, okay. And then there were a couple of days when about 5 of them wanted to have circle and the other kids didn't. And she said, well, how about if the 5 of us just come together and we'll do something together and the rest of you can, continue with your work. And they call it work. And so I thought that was pretty cute. Let's see. They use, I think I told you part of this, they do use real props. So there's no plastic allowed, but even there are other props. For example, if they have a musical instrument, it would never be a child's guitar or a child's drum set. Or whatever, a child's horn. It would be a real guitar, a real drum set, because they don't believe that it produces the same quality sound as the real thing, if a child's one. And they want the children to learn to appreciate music from the real product. And so they had real musical instruments. They didn't have a lot, but they did have some. And they even use, like in the kitchen, when the children prepare the food with the chef, they let the children use the real utensils, including knives. And I asked about that. I said, when do you start letting them use knives? And she said, we start teaching them how to use knives at about 3. And she said, children get hurt mostly when they use plastic knives. Plastic knives cause more problems than real knives do. And she said, people don't trust children enough. You have to show them how to do it. And so there was another lesson for me. So everything there is real. It's not, it's natural. Let's see. The trust is obvious. I don't know how to explain it. The teachers trust the children and the children trust the teachers. There was one day, I'm going to talk about projects in just a second, but there was one day when, and maybe, Stacey, did you do the amusement park for the birds yet? Or are you going to do that?
That one's in our upcoming module.
I'm sorry, what?
Hold on. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you, but I misunderstood you. What'd you say?
Oh, good. I'm sorry. That's going to be in our module this week.
Okay. So there's one part in that video where children are on a ladder. And when teachers see that here in the United States, they go crazy. They just think, oh my God, you can't let a, those children were 5, but you can't let a 5-year-old on a ladder. This is a real ladder, a real, adult ladder. And that's what I mean about trust. They trust their kids. They say, of course he can use a ladder. We're right here. He knows how to do it. And that particular child, Stefan, knew how to use that ladder. And there was no problem. But we don't allow our children that kind of freedom here. And I think it's too bad, because I think we limit them too much. Children, this is something that I want all of you to hear. Children in Reggio, in every classroom, the children with special needs have priority over other children. And you probably know this from your reading, but the beautiful part about this, couple of things, you don't know who they are unless it's an obvious disability, but they get first priority before the other children are in the classroom. And if that child needs an aid for whatever reason, if they are in need of an aid, the aid is with them. And of course, the city provides that, which is lovely. But they call them, and I love this, and those of you who have had me in classes know that I still do this. They call them children with special rights. They don't call them children with special needs, because they feel that when you say needs, it makes them sound needy and it makes them sound different. But if you say rights, it makes them sound like they have rights just like any child does. And so they're always called children with special rights. I mean, they're never called anything in front of any other kid, but if they have to refer to them. And so they're given priority over other children. So once that child or those 2 children are set in each classroom, then the other kids are filled in. Excuse me. Projects. Okay, so this is what a lot of people get confused about. So projects have to last at least 2 weeks. Now, when I say have to, sometimes they don't. But when you're planning, you have to think in your mind, will this project be sustainable for at least 2 weeks? And if not, then you're supposed to discard it. So when I was there, Stacey, for the amusement park for the birds project. And so that project lasted over a year. And some projects last 2 weeks, some projects last 3 months. Most projects, I think, are a couple of months. The depth that they go into with projects is totally amazing. They were doing a Tyrannosaurus Rex when I was there. And the T-Rex they were measuring it out, and it truly was the size that a T-Rex would really be. And so they use the Atelier, obviously, because it wouldn't fit in a classroom. And it was gigantic. And that's why another reason they have the ladder in there, because the kids had to get to the top of the head of the T-Rex in order to, they were making it out of, what do you call that stuff? Not plaster Paris, but that modeling material. I can't think of it.
Paper mache?
Yeah, paper mache.
Paper mache.
Yeah, paper mache. And it was as big as a real T-Rex. And they were also putting the insides of the T-Rex. So the kids were saying things like, well, T-Rex must have had a really big heart, because it was such a big animal that if you had a little heart, it wouldn't be big enough for the animal. And then, of course, they started talking about, things like, imagine how big his poop would be and things like that, of course. And but they were thinking about it. They were thinking about how big does his heart have to be? How big does his digestive tract have to be, and so forth, which which is really planning. So they did the insides of the T-Rex as well as the outsides of it. So the projects are supposed to be planned for at least 2 weeks. And people always ask me the question, what if a child's not interested in a project? Well, that doesn't happen, because let's say you're doing, I don't know, an ocean life or something like that. And in the art area in your classroom, you're going to make squid and lobsters and stuff out of paper mache. And in science, you're going to, I don't know, do the difference between salt water and fresh water. And in the kitchen, you're going to decide what these animals eat, or maybe you're going to make something from these animals for you to eat, and so on and so forth. There is something that every child is interested in. And even if you're building a habitat that a lobster would like to live in the block area, there's something that a child is going to be interested in. And through that something, they're going to become interested in the project. I never saw a child that didn't they may not have been gung-ho at the beginning, but by the time they entered the project, they were interested. I also saw classrooms where more than one project was going on. And I saw projects where they only lasted a couple of weeks. I was in a baby's classroom, infants, and the teacher brought in a whole mound of clay. Now remember, they don't use Play-Doh, so no Play-Doh allowed. It's real clay. And they just put the mound of clay in the middle of the floor, just put it there. And they said, we're going to explore this clay. These are babies. These are 6-month-old to a year. And the children, like the first day, they were just touching it and feeling it and seeing what it felt like. And the next day, the teacher would bring in water and rub it down with water. And then the next day, she'd bring things to stick into the clay. And every day they explored it differently. And it lasted a couple of weeks. So it doesn't have to be super, super elaborate either. I'm going to say one more thing, and then we can open this up for questions. But parent night. So every teacher who works in a preschool worries about parent teacher night, or whatever you want to call it. And I was blown away, because this is like the event of the month in Reggio Emilia. It's like the parents can't wait to go. The kids can't wait to go. It's an event. So what happens? So first of all, the children make the invitations to come to parent night and hand them to their parents. And the teachers make sure that the child hands them to the parent, so the parent gets the invitation, and they're hand done by the child. The children come to the meeting, and the children prepare the meal for the parents at that meeting. So when I was there, I think I only went to a couple of them, but the one that I remember, they had soup and salad with really good homemade bread. It was really wonderful. The children also create the agenda for the meeting, which is a total riot. Can you imagine? So on the agenda, there was one thing, and that was all they wanted to talk about were dinosaurs. That was it. And so they had this meeting, and it was the cutest thing you ever saw. And the kids were there, and they were talking about dinosaurs. And in the back of the room, there was this guy, and he must have been, if he wasn't a grandfather, he might have been a great grandfather. He was pretty old. And he was so cute, and he was raising his hand, and he said, I used to be a paleontologist. And the kids went crazy, because they knew what that word meant. They use big words, they use good vocabulary, everything is proper. And they were swarming all over him. And he was so excited, and he said, I could bring my tools in if you would like me to. And I started to cry. And so he brought his tools in. The kids loved him. He loved the kids. It was really beautiful. But after they have dinner together, then the children go into another room where they've already hired high school kids to take care of them. And they have cots set up so the kids can go to sleep. And then the parents have the adult meeting, which is like the boring stuff, like budgets and, vacuum cleaners and stuff like that. And, but nobody wanted to go home. It was like 11 o'clock at night, and I kept thinking, isn't anybody going to go home? And this was a Thursday, there was school the next day. And it was like I'm not kidding you, it was like the event of the month. So they approach it very differently there. It's like the kids are included. Of course, they're there, and it's really sweet. Very quickly, what happens when they go to elementary school, people worry about this. They're free, they're curious, they're excited, they're turned on, they're motivated. They go to elementary school and bam, what happens? Well, what happens in Reggio is the elementary teachers said, these kids are so turned on and so excited. We can't put the kibosh on them now. So they said, we have to continue with what you're doing. And they also use project learning in their elementary schools. And then when they get to high school, the high school teacher said the same thing. And so I went into the high schools and I thought, how does this work in high school? How do they do chemistry and physics and all history? How do they do all that stuff that you're supposed to do in high school? Well, what they do, I know we're getting late here, but what they do is, when I was there for 6 weeks, the students choose 2 subjects. When I was there, one group chose fashion design. Remember, this is Italy. And the other group chose car stuff, car mechanics, or I don't know, car stuff. And you could go into either group, but all of your history, the umbrella, for example, was fashion design. The history of fashion and why it was the fashion then, and what happened and why did it change, and why did they have the outfits that they have, and what changed them, and so on and so forth. And and math, there's a lot of math, and believe it or not, involved in creating different outfits and sewing and so forth. Chemistry, physics, all of your subjects were taught through the umbrella subject of fashion design. And the same thing with car mechanics. And then after 6 weeks, they vote on new topics. So it continues throughout their entire 12 years in the system. And so that's about it. I could go on and on and on and on, but I know I promised what I probably went over. I'm sorry, but I tried to keep it at 40 minutes. And I'll be glad to answer any questions you have.
No, Deya, it was perfect. It was perfect timing, and I'm sure I speak for all of us when I say, I mean, we could have listened to you the whole hour and then some. Honestly, what I'm excited about is, I know you weren't able to see the questions, but you literally covered 90% of them. And just for the students, I want to bring to your guys' attention, a lot of you had the questions about how does this bridge into elementary and beyond? How do we include children with special rights? A lot of you asked about family involvement, and the big one is, and Deya is not surprised by this, is the question about project work. Well, what if a child's not interested, and how do you do it? So, I mean, I'm very thrilled because I knew Deya would answer that. That if you guys have any other outstanding questions, please ask them. I'm going to ask you to use the reactions button or the emojis on your Zoom. If you could hold up your hand, that would be easier for me to, for Deya to locate you.
The one other thing I wanted to say about project work is, don't forget that besides project work, the regular classroom is still going on. So the project is in addition to other, the regular stuff. But I never saw a kid who didn't somehow get involved in a project. Okay. So I see some chat thingies, but am I supposed to check those or?
No. Oops. how do I get back? Hold on. Can you hear me? Okay, good. No, you're good, Deya. I've been monitoring the chat. I was just asking people to pay particular attention when you brought up the children with special rights, because
Yeah.
a few people had questions.
Yeah.
And you were so thorough in covering everything. And I know these students asked a lot of really amazing questions, and they worked so hard on these last modules, really trying to take it all in.
It's a lot. It's a lot to take. I mean, you have to remember, I was there for months at a time. And I went back several times, and I'm trying to share with you, you know, in 40 minutes, the stuff that stood out for me. So of course you're not going to get it all. It's confusing, but it's just so beautiful. It's such a beautiful method. And then I think about our really structured systems, and I think about how tense and uptight some of our kids are, and I worry about that. I worry they've got their whole lives to be tense and uptight. It's just not necessary. I do have to say that a lot of times, because I used to be an NAEYC validator, and a lot of times I will hear students say, well, we can't do such and such because of licensing. And about 98% of the time that I hear that, it's not true. And I don't know whether the director is saying it and then the teachers are repeating it, but you can check licensing regulations easily. If your director doesn't give you a copy of them, all you have to do is go on social services and go to childcare licensing, and you can check them, because about 99% of what you're hearing a lot of times is not true. It's a good excuse for not doing certain things.
Yep. Deya, I have a question. A student just messaged me, and you know, you're not going to be surprised by this one. Deya and I field and vet this exact question all the time, and I'm glad you asked it. How do we assess children for their academic readiness, especially for adopting a Reggio philosophy here? How do we know they're ready for elementary school?
Okay, so
I like this one.
There's no formal way to test them in the Reggio schools. Those kids are so far above our kids, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. They're doing math, they're doing reading way before our kids are doing it, but they're doing it in a natural, in a natural way. It just happens, and they're doing it because they need to do it. Like I remember one time watching a little boy, and he had to figure out how tall something had to be in order to achieve whatever he was doing. And he didn't know how to do it. And I don't understand the metric system, but he was trying to figure it out, and it involved math. And so because he needed to find that answer, he went to the teacher, and the teacher said, well, here are some measurements, you know, let's work on this. And it happens naturally. And I saw children learn to read long before our kids learn to read. And they don't go, ba, oh, oi, ba, oh, they don't do that. It just happens. It happens in an organic, natural way. But when you're trying to teach the sound of ball, I mean, I've seen little kids in our preschools where they are almost in tears trying to learn to read. And it's not supposed to be like that. It's supposed to happen naturally. And if you understand the child's brain, it's going to happen. You can't make it happen sooner. No matter what you do, you can rub their heads, you can do whatever you want to do, but it's not going to happen sooner. And some kids start reading when they're 5, some kids start reading when they're 7, but they're all reading by the time they're 10. And you have to just let those things go. I can remember when my daughter was you know, a baby, and parents were comparing when their kids would crawl. And I was like, are you kidding me? Really? I mean, does it really matter that your kid crawled at 6 months and your kid crawled at 7 months? Does it really matter? They're all crawling. It's nuts. So there's not a formal way. They do not test their children there. I think that we've gone crazy with testing here. I think we have expectations of our children that are unrealistic and unnatural. I don't know how you get around that. I mean, in my preschool, when I had my preschool, I wouldn't approve of testing. I had checklists, but I didn't have tests. You know your kids well enough. You know which ones need help. You don't have to have a sheet of paper to tell you that, right? Okay.
Yep, absolutely. Good. Yali, I saw you had your hand raised. Yeah, go ahead, Yali.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hi, Yali.
Hi, Professor. So good to see you here.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, so I was just wondering, I mean, maybe this is a big topic. So, but we all know the Reggio Emilia, philosophy and approach. There are, firms from Italy, and they are I mean, they have their own community time, they have their own budget. Like you said, the teacher are paying, as same rate for elementary school and high school teachers. But here, United States are different. I mean, it's just very different. We have regulations, we have things, just babies cannot do. And rather than we say, this is school is a philosophy, normally people are send their kids to daycare just in order to cover them. They can't find anybody to take care of the children.
Right.
So what do you think will be the most important soil for, we utilize Reggio Emilia way here in American to let this approach to serve American children and their families?
Yeah. That's a really good question. Hi, Sophia.
She can hear you. I'm on my headphone.
Okay.
Okay.
The Reggio Emilia method does not cost any more than any other method does. In fact, it probably costs less because you're not using more materials. You're not using a lot of plastic toys and you're using natural things that are in the environment already. So that's one thing. But what I think has to happen, Yali, and this is wishful thinking, is that maybe with a new administration and with our new first lady being a teacher and an educator in college, she has the same degree I have, by the way, that maybe the federal government will appreciate teachers and start realizing that preschool teachers need help, and that I know they can't pay our salaries, but they can pay partially. They can pay part of our salaries, and then the schools can make up the difference. But I also think that that means that we as preschool teachers, have to become professional as well. In other words, we have to take our education seriously. We can't just say, oh, I'm just going to do this because my kids are little and I just want to babysit. It's not babysitting. This is the time, well, you know me, Yali, and you know all this because you were my TA, but this is a time when their brains are forming, and it's probably the most important time in their life for education, although nobody seems to appreciate us. And we have to take this profession more seriously. And so I just hope and pray that somebody recognizes this, that we need help from the federal government, or at least the federal government tells the states that some of this money has to be allocated for preschool teachers. And then once we get the money, the Reggio system is not, I don't know, Stacey, I don't think it's any more expensive than any other system. It's really natural to have the documentation. Did you guys get into that yet? The documentation stuff yet?
We briefly did it this last module, and then the next two modules is observation and documentation.
Yeah. That involves some money because you're using some technology, but I think almost everybody has that. You all have phones, and I don't think it involves any more money. In fact, I think it involves less project work. I mean, almost all the projects I did involved the parents helping me and pitching in. And if I said, if I said I needed toilet paper rolls, I would get 1,000 of them. But you have to put the word out. You have to involve, maybe not now. I went to Safeway today and there's no toilet paper, by the way. You have to involve the parents as much as possible. And the more you involve your parents, the more they'll buy into your system, because they feel like, oh, this is really important. You have to, unfortunately, besides educating the children, we have to educate the parents. And when they see that their children are mixing blue and red and creating purple, and you tell them, do you realize that's chemistry? It's not chemistry with a Bunsen burner, but it's chemistry at a 4-year-old level. And the parents go, oh, I never thought of that. That's also what we have to do. And that's what I mean about taking it seriously as a profession. That's part of our job. It's part of a job. It never goes away. Yeah.
Madhavi?
Yes, I have one question, Professor. First of all, it is very nice to hear from somebody who really went and experienced this. It feels very nice because we don't get to read all this in the book.
I know.
So it was really nice talking to you.
Thank you.
Question I had, that in Reggio Emilio, you said that they are using candles, they are letting the child stay alone in the backyard wherever he's playing. But how is that possible in US here, where we have so many rules and parents are like always like fighting with teachers, like, why did my child get hurt and why you're not paying attention? So isn't it very difficult to implement all this exactly like that in US?
Well, of course, that's a wonderful question. And you're right. You're absolutely right. You can't do it all. However, when I came back, I tried to implement as much as I could without pushing the boundaries too much. Like I got, the candles that you put inside, you know what I mean, like votive candles. And I used those and I explained to the parents, that's what I mean. Here we go with parents again, how candles and music make your whole body relax. And that's important for the child. It's important for the child's brain. And they like that. They actually like that when I explained it to them. I would never let a child go out by himself in the United States. You can't do that. But what I was trying to illustrate was sometimes we go a little crazy here. We just go, sometimes our rules are just crazy, that we have to be on top of children all the time. And sometimes I'm not sure. And that's what I meant by a lot of teachers will say, according to licensing, you have to do this or you can't do that. And a lot of times that's not necessarily true. So you have to check it too. So I think it's a balance. It's a balancing act. If you don't feel comfortable with the candle, don't use it. But of course you can put, you can have the children put beautiful rocks on the table. I mean, are you from India or Pakistan or India? Where?
I am from India. Sorry.
India. Because you make beautiful displays for your tables all the time. And I'm sure the children could do that, and you would be wonderful at that. So I just took as much as I could and brought it back, and I couldn't do it all. You can't do it all. Okay. I mean, I couldn't have a drum set in my school, even though I wanted to. Yeah.
Thank you so much for answering that.
Sure.
Yeah, I think sometimes in America, that Deya and I talk about this, that it's often this push and pull between what we know about developmentally appropriate practice and what we know through the litigious society that we have now and licensing. And it's a balance. It's a push and pull for sure. Yeah, that was a great question, Madhavi.
Yeah.
And thank you guys. I mean, I know we're pushing the time here, but thank you for staying on and thank you for asking great questions. Deya literally covered every question, and you guys each wrote 3 questions to me on Canvas, and she has, as I knew she would, she covered everything. If you have anything outstanding, just email me, and then I'll talk to her.
Yeah.
Um,
We talk
she's
all
always,
the time anyway, so.
yeah, we do. Yeah, Deya and I talk all the time, so I can throw any questions at her. But I think it was just, Deya, it was just wonderful to have you tonight. I know we all benefit from this. It's always one of my favorite things to talk with Deya about this. And I do have to add for all of you students a really quick anecdote. The one thing, not the one thing, Deya taught me many things. And when I was at BBC 20 years ago, she's the reason that I got into early childhood, and I've told you guys this before, but one of the anecdotes she shared tonight about the placemats, for some reason that was burned into my brain 20 years ago, and I've never been able to look at a placemat the same when talking about how individualistic it is, and I don't know why, it is so imprinted and ingrained in me, and I was happy that she brought that anecdote here tonight.
Isn't that the funniest thing? I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Little
Yeah, so simple, like in our minds, but so important to them to say, why would you have an individual placemat? I mean, that really changed my whole perspective, that one anecdote 20 years ago. So I just, was glad you brought that one tonight too.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was so fun to do this. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you. And please, everybody, just give a virtual round of applause for Deya. Thank you again, Deya.
Okay. Have a good night.
Good. You too. We'll talk soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay. Good night. Bye. Okay, everyone, you are free to leave if you want. I'm going to record a module tonight. I'm going to log off. I know you guys are tired. I'm going to record what to expect in the next module, and you can just watch it. I'll post it to an announcement. Shweta, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I have a question. I have a question from previous module. Is it okay to ask because it's already 8 o'clock? I hope I'm
Yeah,
not.
let me stop recording.
Okay.